Hi everyone, thanks for coming to the after lunch edition. I hope you all have a good lunch. My job here is to try and help you not slip into the post-food coma. But considering we're talking about change management and configuration management, it's going to be a bit tricky. So my name's Steve Earle. I've been working in service management for about 20 years. I have implemented ITSM. I've implemented ITSM big scale. I ran the enterprise ticketing project for BlackBerry back in the early 2000s, and also then went on to Telstra International. I've been with Cloudhouse for just over a year and a half, and I joined them as a product manager for Guardian, which is one of the products we're going to be talking to you about today. And my colleague John.
Thanks, Stephen. So my name is John Devlin. I'm head of pre-sales with Cloudhouse. So my job is to try and talk through demonstrations, which is what I'll be doing today. Stephen's going to guide you through the slides we have. Also if we've got any questions going through, I will try and do my best to answer them. I'm not claiming to be an expert for anything else, but I'll certainly do my best to answer them for you, and that's what we're here to do. I've been with Cloudhouse actually exactly as long as Stephen. We started on the same day, about 18 months ago. And yes, that was when Duo kicked off, so yeah.
So we have a loose agenda to follow. We're going to talk a little bit about drift. I don't know how familiar you all are with the concept of drift, so we're going to go through what that is, why it matters to you, because it does, the challenges that drift poses, the problems it can give you with processes, change management, incident management are the favourite two processes that get complicated by this, how we directly impact change management, and then how we can help you on your change management journey with our product Guard, which John will demo and will show you the integration with ServiceNow. So, before this session, I did some poll questions, and quite a few people responded to those poll questions. I'm hoping some of the respondents are in the room because I have some questions to ask back. So first of all, we asked how many people have implemented CMDB. Vast majority have, 11 out of the 15 respondents did, but 4 people did not. If you answered this question as I do not have a CMDB, would you mind raising your hand? Awesome, all of you. So, lady in the blue there, what are you doing today to track what you have what are your plans to track what you have?
So we're currently putting some things into Archer.
Okay.
But we are just kicking off a move into ServiceNow next week, and so our CMDB will get.
So ServiceNow will become your system of record, and then Archer will slave from that, or will it?
That depends on if you ask security or not.
Okay. No, I personally had an encounter with Archer when I was at BlackBerry because we implemented Archer and BNC Remedy with BlackBerry. But yes, I get it depends if you're asking security or not.
Yeah, so right now our Archer is our system of record for the CMDB, but it's even not. It's not what it's supposed to be, and it's not accurate. So,
I'm sure security's.
That's why I said no, because
Yeah.
it's no, we don't have it.
And I'm sure security are very happy with the fact it's not complete.
To them it is.
Okay. Okay, other respondents, I didn't get everyone who put their hand up. No, we don't want to put their hand up. Gentlemen
Use open source tool was our original CMDB.
Right.
In our service management tool. That was a colossal failure, so we migrated to an open source project called Sniper.
Okay, that's not what I've encountered before. Okay, it's interesting. Anybody else want to volunteer current CMDB state and why we haven't implemented one? So the challenge of not having a CMDB is it's hard to manage what you don't know you've got. So that was my motivation for that question, is so I could understand where we were kind of coming from, so we could level set. So bunch of respondents around which CMDB do you have? I'm interested in the others. I'm guessing you were an other, because you're not one of the main 4 in existence. Any other respondents here who could tell me what you're going for?
Everything that we use for our CMDB is custom written.
Okay.
I coded it myself.
Okay. Have you taken data models from industry standard data models, or is it a totally custom data model as well? Sorry, have you taken industry data models, or is it a custom data model that you built as well?
Custom I do with an online system that has some very interesting security requirements.
Okay. Okay, cool. Anybody else? Any other CMDs? Yes.
Sharewell,
Okay. Are you looking to stay on Sharewell, or are you looking to?
that's not an option.
Okay.
It don't exist anymore.
Yeah. So, are you migrating to Ivanti Neurons, or are you shopping?
That's
Shopping. So, I then asked the question around change management. So, when you're thinking about change management, I asked how many things in your organisation do you think actually don't go through it? I'd like to say I was surprised that there are a couple of respondents saying more than 50% of the changes that go on in their organisation probably don't go through change management. And I'm not surprised, because change management is hard to implement. Change management is seen as a bureaucratic process that, instead of helping the business move forward, has a horrible tendency of slowing things down. Slowing things down isn't intrinsically bad, because it means you pause and you think. But many teams would much prefer it if they didn't have to go through change management. And part of that is because it is set up to almost be like your infrastructure police. And people have this natural aversion to having people looking over their shoulders or second guessing what they might be thinking. And then, of course, you've got the other challenges of change management, which is things like cabs. And how on earth do you get a bunch of interested groups together to actually discuss change, rather than just sit there and wait till you get to your change request and find out whether you can do it or not? My experience of cabs and change management in the past is largely the latter. You get a bunch of people together and they're not actually interested in discussing the bigger slate of change. They tend to be interested in, can I do mine or not? So I'm not hugely surprised, but it is a shame that more don't go through it. And I think the trick is finding an engagement model for your teams around how can we get people to contribute to the process and not see it as that bureaucratic overhead, and how can we shift it from being change management to change enablement. Because if you see it as an enabling process, buy-in becomes a little bit easier. And then we had the question which I posed this morning. We've only had one response, but I asked if people have formal change validation processes or not. One respondent says, we just take the implementer's word for it. Doesn't surprise me, they're the person doing the change, so why wouldn't you? But what we're going to talk a little bit about is how independent validation can help prove that your change management process is working. But they were very interesting responses, particularly the no CMDBs and also the rate of change. It's nice to see people actually realise that it's not that panacea solution that is magically fixing everything. So let's talk about what drift is. So really, drift is the result of change. Usually unplanned, usually unapproved, and usually untracked. It's just a fancy term for change that shouldn't really be happening. Drift is when something just doesn't appear to be quite right. Usually, it's not usually something major, it's not usually something that sticks out like a sore thumb, or that's causing an outage in its own right, because that would be identified by monitoring systems or other things. It's usually something like someone's made a configuration file change, but only made it to one node in a cluster. Or they've only made a small little change in one file in a group, so you get that annoying situation where a user experiences a once in a while this doesn't work problem, because only once in a while are they hitting the firewall that's got the weird misconfiguration. But it's a real pig to track down, because it's not recorded anywhere. So unless someone goes forensically searching for this stuff, you don't find it. And then, as I say, drift hides in plain sight. It doesn't always impact operations. It's once in a while, something isn't quite right, something doesn't feel right, when I used to work in a network operations centre, we always used to say the network had moods. It would ebb and flow. It was like a living thing. One day it would be beautifully perfect and everything would run great. Next day, total disaster and it's fires everywhere. But no one's changed anything. Someone's changed something somewhere. So why do you care? Drift lurks. We use the Darth Sidious background for this because it really is the dark side. You can't see it. You don't know it's there. It's just like a niggling feeling that something isn't going to plan. And of course, drift reduces your confidence because no one will admit to changing it, but you know something has changed. And you're like, it doesn't feel right. And this usually exists in your monitoring teams first, or in your operations centres. So a SecOps centre or a NOC or an ops centre will usually get this, or your incident help desk will feel the pain of it, but not be able to understand what's going on. And then, of course, change management's really, really hard. Because change managers will sit there and say, we're improving them, we're monitoring them, they're being closed, the process looks like it's working. But if the process is working, why are you having weird, random behaviours? And drift creates uncertainty and doubt. And there's nothing worse in IT than doubt. IT likes things to work as planned. Engineering likes things to implement as planned, and for it to just happily go about its business. But when you've got uncertainty and doubt because something isn't working right, it saps time, it saps energy, it saps resources, and you're not getting on with what you should be getting on with, which is the interesting business value-driven stuff. So things change all the time. Cloud makes things interesting in this space, because with dynamic infrastructure, dynamic sizing of resources, again, it's hard to keep track of exactly what you've got going on today. Patch Tuesday. Did all the patches get to where they were meant to go? Probably is probably the answer. But can you verify the fact it did? Not really, unless I go around every single machine that's supposed to have had it, or I go through some huge log file from my patch distribution tool and hope to find that every host name I expected is in it. Do you actually know all the hosts that it should get to? You need to satisfy governance checkpoints. Hard to do when you're not sure what's really going on in your own infrastructure. And you say with certainty if there is uncertainty in doubt? How can you say to an auditor when they ask you, are you compliant? Probably 98%, but they want to see 100%. So why not risk it? And are your devices as they should be versus just how they are today? Is how they are today how you want them to be? You can know. So, as Yoga would say, dark side clouds everything, impossible to see the future is. And this is because we get the uncertainty, creates a fog in your environment, stuff you can't see through. It makes it hard to understand what's really going on. If you don't know your current state, how can you plan anything? And current state should be state and what your future state is going to be. But if you've got all this fog in your infrastructure, how can you hope to plan properly? And it also makes your change verification and reconciliation laborious. Your change management teams trying to validate did everything that was meant to happen last night really happen as it should becomes a very, very long walk process. There is a lot going on, there is a lot to chase up. And with uncertainty, that means they have to chase everything rather than only chase the things that look like exceptions. So let's talk a little bit about change reconciliation. So change management, typically for organizations, you finish your change, or changes usually, and you have to review them. You have to make sure that they're closed up properly. You have to make sure that the bow is tied on the box. Did it take place as planned? Were there deviations from the approved implementation process? Did the implementer at 3 a.m. in the morning actually do it how they were supposed to? All this is like an interview process that you have to do afterwards. Because if you don't do it, you can't be sure that you're fulfilling your change controls. This is laborious, this is time consuming. In large enterprises, you can have hundreds or thousands of changes going on every day. So unless you've got a change management army, I'm not aware of anyone who does have a change management army. Usually it's 2 or 3 people tops looking after this stuff. When I was at BlackBerry, we had 4, and that was to control an entire global infrastructure backbone. That's a lot to track down manually. So what we propose is we should be optimizing for change enablement. So we can get rid of some of the bureaucracy, so we can automate change reviews, so we can automate the things that have gone well. Because if they've gone well, they don't need the same level of scrutiny. If you can prove it easily, you're now looking at things from an exception perspective. And if you think about it, the service desk, incident management, that's all exception. Something is wrong, so we deal with it. We don't worry about the day-to-day stuff that's working fine. That's not interesting. We don't need to deal with it. Why should change really be any different? So, for an optimized approach, you really want automate, automate, automate. And that's partly what John's going to show you in a minute. And then when we get to planning, you need to be able to confirm that the state of the environment is what it's meant to be before you go and do your change. Because what if something's changed undocumented 5 minutes before your window, and now actually the change you're about to implement is not going to work out because something has drifted, something has occurred. You need to make sure that actually everything on your change ticket is all the things that need to change. Are you sure it is? What I tend to find and tended to find is your change ticket would be overpopulated because they want to play it safe. But then again, that's now creating noise. Because then when you come and do your change review, you said you were going to change these 15 things. Well, only 5 of them changed. Why did only 5 of them change? If all 15 were on there saying they were going to change. Doesn't play well. And then being able to do impact analysis. Who's really going to be affected? It's not necessarily about what application is affected, but who in your business is going to be affected. Because they're the ones who are going to be ringing the service desk in the morning if it doesn't go as planned. So there's a whole area of planning and review, but making sure you know these things helps you get to enablement rather than the change police. Any questions on that? Does that make sense? That would be an either preferred state to be in. So we're going to give you a demo of what we've been working on at Cloudhouse with our Guardian product. We have built an integration with ServiceNow. Who in the room has ServiceNow? I know a lot of respondents said they did. Majority. Lovely. In the demo, we're going to look at change management and incident management. John's going to go through the detail of what he's going to show. Cloudhouse Guardian is our product that looks at drift analysis and drift management. So it's the natural fit for this, but basically Guardian allows you to look at what has changed, what is changing in your environment. And it can do it at a very granular level. But that's up to you how granular you want to go. So John, over to you.
Great, thanks Ian. So we're going to be talking through a fairly simple demonstration of the life cycle of a change. We're going to start with setting the change up. So those of you that use ServiceNow currently are going to have a little bit of a reminder of all the wonderful things that you have to go through to set up a change inside ServiceNow. We're then going to go into Guardian and take a look at how that can start to detect some of those changes that are being planned ahead to give visibility of that to people that are interacting with the CIs on a regular basis and doing monitoring associated to them. We're going to do a change, which is, I'm not going to show you the change because that takes far too much time. So what I'm actually going to do is use the demo magic to be able to skip over that bit, but then show you what happens after the fact. Where we're going to go in and actually validate the change, see what's actually changed, detect where the change has occurred, is it what it's supposed to be, and then feeding that back into ServiceNow as audit and evidence that can then be consumed as part of the ticket. We're also going to talk a little bit about what might happen if something has gone wrong or something hasn't gone as expected. So we're going to show you how at the end of the process, if there are any issues, we can actually trigger an incident to be created automatically that can then give quick access to the information around the change to the incident management team, helping that investigation, driving that process forward as well. So let me switch over to the demo. To simplify my own task up here, I've done a pre-recorded demo, but I'm going to talk you through it rather than just play a video. So we're starting inside ServiceNow. We're going through and doing the initial setup of a change. We're going to detail things through the standard interface. This is a fresh out-of-the-box ServiceNow environment that we're working with, so obviously things may be different if you configure things differently. And we're following the normal IT change process. That's like IT change process. So we're going to be capturing some basic information about the change itself. We're going to then go through and capture some information around the elements that were involved in the change and set up a schedule around when the actual change needs to happen. Change window is going to define one of the elements that we're going to be looking at from the automation perspective to determine if things are happening in the right period and making sure that they're being changed as required. We've got a number of CIs that are actually going to be included in this change request. So I'm just going to go through and add those in. And what you'll see is we're actually tracking those as nodes inside Guardian. So as you probably noticed from Stephen's slide, a bit of referencing in slightly different ways. A CI is a node, in effect, in our system. But the idea is that, in effect, we're monitoring all of those. They're then feeding information into the Guardian system. So when it comes to do the automation piece and do that validation scan, we can actually drive it through. Before we can get to do the change, we've got to go through the assessment and approval process. So I need to go and find somebody who's going to sign off quickly. So fortunately, Bernard is very good at signing off changes and doesn't give a huge amount of information from us to be able to actually get things signed off, which is helpful, particularly for demo purposes. Once obviously we've gone through that authorized stage, we're then at the point where the change is scheduled. So we can then get to the point where we can actually perform that change and get the action done. So the interesting thing about this is once we've got that scheduled flag associated to it, we've then got things that are going to happen inside Guardian. Guardian is going to be aware that those particular CIs have been associated to a change request, and then be able to provide that information back to the people that are going to be working in Guardian on a day-to-day basis so that they have visibility of the fact that the changes are coming up. And then once we actually implement the change, we'll then see what that does in terms of presenting that change through in terms of what's happened. It's important to mention that Guardian is only going to monitor the CIs that it knows about. So in this case, what you can see in our Guardian interface is those 3 nodes that I added to the change have been listed here, and we've got a flag that highlights the fact that these CIs are about to have some changes done to them. We can also look at all of the changes that are coming up across all of the CIs that we're monitoring. So we can have a full list of everything that's expected to happen in the future. But we can also look at it in a more discrete way, where we can go into each individual CI and see the changes that are associated to it. Obviously, as in this case, there may be multiple changes planned against a particular CI. So just giving visibility of that to the people that are in this interface so that they can understand what changes are going to be coming down the line. So we have visibility and quick visibility into those upcoming change requests. We have the ability to go in and filter it down by a node or a CI just to give that specific focus, or we can look at it across a group of nodes to give a wider visibility of the changes that are coming up down the line and help give an understanding of the change that's been done. So now's the point where we actually get some interesting things happening. A change is going to occur. So Trent, that I was talking about for our actually slides, is going to go in and make a change. We have an actual start date associated to this. That's the change window that we've now opened to make the change. We can go in, make some changes to those CIs in accordance with what's scheduled in the change request. And then what's going to happen is we're going to complete that action, mark it for review. That's then going to flag that this is now ready for somebody to come in and actually validate that the changes occurred. The interesting point here is the actual end date is automatically set, and that's what's going to actually trigger something to happen inside Guardian. So Guardian has a knowledge of the configuration of the CI prior to the change, and now that we've had confirmation that the change has been completed, we're now going to automatically go scan that node again and be able to do a comparison between the two. Everything that happens inside Guardian is ordered in an event log, and the change has actually driven a number of events to trigger through the integrations that we've got built in. I'm showing this just so we can talk through some of those elements. But the important bit here is we're keeping a track of what has happened inside Guardian and what actions have been taken. We're not acting as the system of record associated with change. That's still inside ServiceNow. So one of the elements that we have at the end of this process of going through and determining what's going on is to feed the change information back into ServiceNow. And that's then going to be logged in the activity trail against the change request. We're actually populating that with information on all of the checks that we've done as part of that validation process, highlighting where the change has been successful, and also giving some understanding about what other changes were detected as we went through, but giving the ability to jump into Guardian to go and actually see the detail of that. So now that we're in the review stage, trying to understand what has changed is obviously very important. So rather than having to go through all of the configuration, we filter down to just the changes that have occurred, and in effect elevate that and speed up that process going through. So in this case, we can see that a file changed, check sums associated to it have been modified, and we can identify what has actually happened. But with the other element here, we're actually using one of the powerful features of Guardian to define what should be implemented in terms of a valid configuration against that particular attribute. If you're not meeting that particular criteria, we can then flag that as a breach of policy. So if something was accidentally left open, a port was opened as part of the change and it got closed, or in this case, for example, we actually had some permissions that were set. We validated that after the change, those permissions were reset to what they should be, confirming that that was going on and giving some traceability to that as well. However, we did have a problem in this change, surprise. A demo actually has an issue that we can then show what happens. So we identified that a particular CI was not passing its validation because it did not have an associated change in the change window. We know it was supposed to be changed, it was in that list of CIs, but what we've determined in Guardian is that no change was made to that particular CI. Is that how it should be? Was it like Stephen was talking about earlier, where we just put a whole load of CIs in the change request just to make sure they might be captured? Or is there something that a change really should have been done but didn't happen? So in that case, we've identified this problem, and this is where we're going to be triggering that push to create an instance, providing all of that information then into the incident ticket, looping it back to link back to the CI, and providing that back trace to what's happened, what's occurred, what we think should have occurred, and hopefully helping the investigation team go through and speed up the process of doing analysis around the incident, being able to drive forward with the investigation and getting the change finished off as appropriate, rather than it coming as part of a failure at the end of the process. I realised that was quite a quick run through of everything. Can I get some validation that this is actually something that you could see some value associated to? Have you got issues where that sort of validation is a challenge for you in your processes currently? Yeah. And that's what
the
we
challenge, because it's sapping the energy from what you should be doing.
Yeah.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, please.
You can see the CIs that the changes are being made against, but what if there's an active incident against a CI you're about to make a change on? Does it know that? Can it see that?
So it has, sorry.
So at the moment, we don't take an active open incident as being an interesting object. But that's a very interesting use case around the potential overlap of something operationally is happening, not just this planned activity.
Yeah.
That's definitely something that we could quite easily extend into the equation. But that's the use case we haven't considered yet, but I will now. No, because it's important, because that's when you get those emergency changes where people go and document it by the incident rather than the change. Or the other favourite is, oh, we'll do an emergency change for that incident, we'll do the emergency paperwork later.
Yeah.
Of course, later never really manifests, does it? But no, thank you for that.
Look at problems to open problems.
Yeah, so problems I would hope would be more inclined to flow into change, because they're not usually the, oh, we must fix this fire right now. They're more we have a string of fires that look very similar, and now we've worked out how we deal with it properly. That should be going through a more moderated process, I suppose, I would hope. But yeah, I can definitely see the incident, because they tend to happen right now, and it needs dealing with. Problem I would hope would be more of the formal process approach. Happy to hear it if that's not the case.
Yeah, different scenarios where we have open problems for things that right when you restart.
Right.
So put in the
Yeah.
patch, restarting the server that shouldn't be
So
restarted.
we haven't determined what the real cause is,
Yeah.
but we're monitoring them because, yeah. Lady in blue,
So,
welcome to you.
so the instance there where you took the one that nothing happened to it and you created an incident, what happens in the case where it wasn't done because they decided it wasn't needed or whatever? You just go and close that one then, or?
That's the process that's determined by what's required as part of the validation around the incident and the close down. Now, the idea is that in effect what we're trying to do is elevate the fact that there might be a problem. We're not trying to determine if that is a problem, because it may be that we went to do the change didn't need to happen because it had already been done in a previous change, but actually there's an issue here because the change request said it should change. So the idea is to try and elevate the fact that there was a problem with that change, at least in terms of our understanding of what should have changed as part of it. What actually happens as part of the incident process beyond that point, again, if there's going to be a change, that's going to trigger a change request, that's going to trigger a before and after scan, like we talked about, associated to the change request, to then validate that at the end of the process. But we're not going in and modifying the incident management process associated to it. What we want to do is be able to speed up that initial trigger of the process.
It's more bringing the visibility to the incident people that it needs investigating, and then driving the conversation in your organisation around. We seem to be getting lots of incidents out of changes, and the commonality we see is overloading CIs on changes. Do we need to have a conversation about, do we really understand what it is we're changing? Because we shouldn't keep seeing this behaviour. It's more, because these kind of behaviours are the things that kind of lurk in the background. They're kind of the noise in their own right. You're creating noisy changes when you should be creating surgical changes.
I assume though that you're doing some sort of reporting and stuff off of this, but then in those kinds of cases where, okay, it's not really, it wasn't actually a problem, we thought it might have been a problem, but it's not really a problem. Can you modify it then so that you mark, it's not something that's getting counted against then when you're looking at the metrics?
Yeah, so if you're doing reporting, we will have a reporting dashboard around we created X number of incidents based off these changes, that kind of information. You can then choose to mark them as that's not an event that we're actually concerned with, because you've got to have the conversation or you've kicked off. But that's largely being handled by your process rather than it's just the tool implementing what your process is from that perspective. Does that make sense? Gentleman at the back.
Could you talk a little bit more about the validation tests? Like, where do they come from? Do we have to create them because of when you have out-of-the-box tests? And then you scan the node. Is it your tool that's doing scanning, or can you take off from another discovery tool?
So first question first, in terms of what's actually being determined by the validation. The simple answer is the validation piece we talked about here is just validating that a change occurred within the change window to a CI that was defined in the change request. So that's out of the box. In terms of the policies that I mentioned as we go through, we have out of the box policies that are tied to the CIS benchmarks around security validation and that piece. But we've got clients that are actually building their own policies in the system to be able to go in and define various organisational requirements that they need to meet or have compliance associated to, or even just try to simplify processes. So one client here in the US uses it for tracking the creation of new devices that are being added to the network. They've got a 300-page build guide that has to be adhered to, and in fact, rather than have to go through that manually every time they make a new device, they have Guardian to go in and do that scan for them to validate that everything meets the particular requirements they've set up. So it can be very detailed, it can be very focused, but the idea of this integration is more about just trying to get that validation that the change occurred that we expected to happen. But we're not defining, is that change what was supposed to be changed and the way it was supposed to be changed, unless you've got those policies built around it.
Because that's part of the future roadmap, because obviously the challenge with such broad IT infrastructures and how you want to use your IT to deliver your services, it's hard for us to have a content library that would match all of your needs. But the fact that you can chain the window detection and then the policy engine underneath allows you to get to that fine grain, if that's the level that you wish to audit to. For a lot of people, just the initial change window validation is a big win, because just knowing that stuff changed when it's supposed to already brings down the level of manual intervention. But content is something we're looking at, and we're happy to collaborate with our customers on standards that you need to adhere to, because if you're in a regulated industry where there are external audit standards, more than happy to discuss what those standards look like. And if we can deliver those as content, that's something we would definitely look at. There was someone at the back before I come back to you.
I have a question on the implementation windows done. So you said it starts and scan, and they mark it for review. I have people that won't close implementation tests and do stuff for like 30 days after the change. So does it go by the window listed, or does it go by that? Like, what are the settings for that?
So we have a fail-safe safety net, which is, it was planned to end at this time. No one has actually ended it yet, but to be honest, we're an hour from the end of the window. You should be done now, we're going to scanning now. And then if that doesn't happen, then that gives your change people the ammunition to go and say, you were meant to be done, the system didn't, that you were done because you hit the safety net. If you weren't done, then we need to have a conversation about your overrunning your change windows. But yeah,
Safety net an hour?
you can configure the safety net. But we did sit and have long conversations about, is it safe for us to assume? And then it's like, we have to have something, because so we don't have to go by planned if the actual isn't complete. And we felt an hour after planned, someone has probably finished their window by that point, unless they've hit major complications. At which point that's a different problem. Thank you.
Did you say that, that the scan populates the ticket in ServiceNow?
Yeah.
In the work notes or close notes?
We go in the activity log. In the change into the activity log.
Okay.
So your change people can sit at the activity log and go, there's a Guardian entry. It has been picked up.
Okay. Thank you.
Would it help actually, just a quick one, if we picked it up with the safety net versus an close, would that be of interest when you're doing the audit checks? If we actually stacked it that it was us who decided to scan it versus the
It
window?
would, and I think then I could track behavior, because implementation tests should not be delayed, because then that delays validation and it just throws everything off. So yes, that would probably help, and it would be a statistic that my leaders would definitely like to push back on, that people need to do this as soon as possible after the change, not 30 days later.
Yeah, and when we were constructing this demo and we were in the ServiceNow piece, we were kind of like, we know people don't do this. We know people should do this, so how do we want to illustrate it? And we illustrated it how should versus, yeah, we know there are people out there who have a tendency to not press a button. We are aware of the challenge, it's the safety net. Okay.
I have a question, sorry.
Yeah,
Please.
For those of us without ServiceNow, is it the only integration with ServiceNow?
So what do you have?
We have Ivanti.
You're on Ivanti.
Yeah.
So, and that's neurons, or is that classic Ivanti? Okay. So ServiceNow was first, and I'm sure you'll appreciate the reason ServiceNow was first, because it's the big one and a lot of people have it as by the show of hands. We've roadmapped, the next one is likely to be BMC, and then I'm looking at Ivanti and Jira as the two to follow that. But they'll probably come in parallel, it won't be like a purely serial. Our goal then is to have a framework integration where it's very easy for you guys to understand how we did it, and then we would provide you templated approaches to be able to integrate with Fredbot system that you might have.
And Any other questions?
Anyone like you?
What kind of permissions do you have to have in order to do the validations and stuff?
In terms of
Like doing the scans?
the scan,
Yeah.
yeah, sorry.
So, depending on your platform, so for Windows, we use standard approaches. I mean, we use PowerShell for scanning Windows nodes, we use SSH access. It's the appropriate level of access you feel is necessary for us to see the stuff on the machine that is interesting to you. To change window detection, we don't need any access at all because we just know stuff changed, did it need a change request? Because that's part of the window piece, not anything else. But the actual scan of the minutiae on nodes, etc., we require the appropriate level of access that you're willing to give. And if we can't see the stuff that you want us to see, then obviously we're having a discussion about the level of access. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a famous security conversation. Appropriate.
Oh, going back to the demo, could you show us what it looks like in the ticket, the notes?
I'm not sure. I need to find the video. That's the only issue.
I guess I should have asked.
No, that's all right. That's fine. I'm trying to remember where it comes from.
We will be on the booth till 3:30 if you have to come and ask
Yeah.
detail specific stuff for.
So that's what it looks like in the activity document. We basically just feed that information in as part of the completion of the process around what actually happened.
Then there's a hyperlink to the detailed scan.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. And the idea, of course, is this is then making ServiceNow still the system of record in terms of what's going on around the change. We're just feeding information into that audit block associated to it. Cool. And so we've just spent an awful lot of time talking about the elements, so I'm not going to go through and tell you what we've just seen in the demo. That's all good. So, Steve.
So, as we said, drift is everywhere. Drift is change. It is not something that you can ignore. It's just the kind of change people don't like to acknowledge. And they don't want to necessarily be accountable for it. But it is change. So don't be fooled into it not being change and be worried, oh, it was just a tweak for this, or it's going to be part of the new standard configuration. You change something, own it. Change management needs to be aware of this stuff. If change management isn't aware, then you get the fault problem, you get the uncertainty, you get the doubt. You don't want that. Just let people be open. That does usually require, change management, again, modifying behaviour from not being the police, but to being a safe space process where people are encouraged to own up to what they've done. Can be challenging, that depends on organisations and the way you structure it. But if you can make it that safe space enabling process, people will be more willing to come forward. It's what we found when we've talked to customers about it. And automation, as we all know, used in the right way, used in the right places, doing the right things, can save a huge amount of time, freeing up change management to develop the policy and governance instead of chasing their tails and herding cats to find the stuff that they shouldn't be needing to look for. And when you stop looking over people's shoulders and when you stop being viewed as bureaucracy and, again, police, you will find a much more compliant and participative user community. So don't be the stick, be the carrot. And then service management coupled with drift obviously has a massive value multiplier. Because now we're exposing stuff that's really happening. You can actually get on with your day-to-day jobs and be productive and actively manage your IT infrastructure from a place and a space that you know, rather than having to second guess everything you're doing. That's got to be preferable. So that's the bit about drift and about Guardian. John's going to do a little bit about what we at Cloudhouse do on top of that. We'll be on the booth till 3:30 today. John and I will be around tomorrow as well, so if you want to have any conversations, come find us. We're more than happy to sit and talk to you about it and about challenges you're facing.
Cool. So we talked about Guardian today, principally, which is one of our products It's been around since about 2010. All the products we're talking about here in terms of Guardian and Alchemy, which is one of the other major products that I'll talk about in a second. Pathfinder's an actually newer product that's actually combining elements of both, but I'll get to that as well. So Guardian is used by our clients around the world, most of them here in the US, for particular tracking of those configuration elements that we talked about, giving that visibility of change and drift that's occurring in organisations, particularly in heavily regulated industries, so financial services and other elements where there's an awful lot of validation and checking required and evidence to be presented, and that's where Guardian really feeds into that and why we're talking about it in terms of the integrations that we can do through change processes. Alchemy is a different product, and it's more of a mechanism to try and help modernisation or migration from legacy Windows environments to modern Windows environments. So what it does is it packages your applications, wraps them in one of our packaging capabilities, which then can make the application itself portable to end up in new environments without any changes to the application. So often what you'll see as part of an end of life cycle with Microsoft is that all of a sudden there's a whole load of applications that will pick up and move quite easily into the new environment that you're moving to, whether that's on-prem or in the cloud. But there are going to be those challenging applications that have sat on a server under somebody's desk for the last 20 years that nobody really knows about, nobody knows how it works. They just know that actually they need to keep it because it's part of their key business process. So what we do is make that portable, then move into the new environment, maintaining that business value that it's currently giving, buying time at the very least to find a replacement while getting off those legacy Windows environments that are causing security concerns. And Pathfinder is a mechanism that's actually using the power of Guardian to start to help analyse the scenarios where Alchemy may be useful in the future, but also give some recommendations on migration paths that could be put in place if you're performing cloud migration. So it's a service that is in effect giving you the insights that you can then take to move forward into that migration plan. And where necessary, we can obviously then start to talk about how Alchemy can be used to be able to drive that forward. Obviously, if there's any more information that you want to know, as Stephen says, more than happy to talk about it in a bit more detail. If there's any more information on Guardian and specifics in terms of how it's used by our customer base, we're happy to talk about that as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much. If you've got questions, what you're doing in the next 5-10 minutes, we'll be on the booth 307.
Before you leave, please fill out that little sheet with the little faces and put it in the little pink box at the back of the room. Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.